Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive. It's going to be a fascinating one, I think, into biology
Biology 101?
101. Yeah, like
Yeah.
back to the classroom,
Yeah, exactly. Back to school.
but way more fun, hopefully,
I hope so.
with our amazing expert here. We're going to explore, the tiny but mighty molecules that make life possible.
It's a wonderful world down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's amazing how these microscopic things, water, lipids, proteins, carbohydrates,
Yeah.
nucleotides.
Wow, you just went right through all of them.
Yeah, well, we're going to cover them all.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing how they all work together to create the symphony of life.
Yeah, so we're going to uncover those secrets. We're also going to talk about cellular respiration with and without oxygen.
Yes.
So it's like a behind-the-scenes look at how your body makes energy.
Exactly.
So first up, let's talk about water.
Okay.
Everywhere we drink it every day.
Yeah.
But why is it so essential for life?
Well, you can think of water as the stage for all the chemical reactions that are happening inside your cells. It's a bustling city where molecules can easily meet and mingle and react.
Okay.
And that's because water is a fantastic solvent.
It dissolves things.
It dissolves things. Think about how you dissolve sugar in your coffee.
Right.
That's water's amazing dissolving power at work.
So water helps things mix, but there's more to it, right?
Oh, there's much more to it. It's water's unique structure with its slightly positive and negative charges that allows it to interact with other molecules that are hydrophilic and hydrophobic.
What does that mean?
Yeah, well, hydrophilic molecules like sugar are water-loving, and they dissolve readily in water,
Okay.
whereas hydrophobic molecules like oil are water-fearing,
They don't like it.
and they tend to clump up and avoid water. So think about what happens when you mix oil and water, like in salad dressing.
Yeah, they separate.
They separate. They don't want to hang out.
Right.
So this is really important when you think about cell membranes, for instance,
Okay.
which are made up of lipids.
Right.
We'll get into that later.
Yeah.
But for now, just remember that water's ability to interact with these different types of molecules makes it just the perfect environment for the complex chemical reactions that keep us alive.
So it's like the perfect setting
It's the perfect setting.
for this to all happen.
Yes, exactly.
So water's the ultimate multitasker. It's not just about dissolving stuff. It helps to break down and build up molecules as well.
Yes. It's involved in hydrolysis and dehydration synthesis.
Okay, hydrolysis.
Hydrolysis water molecules act like tiny scissors,
Oh,
breaking the bonds between the molecules.
okay.
So think of it like splitting a long chain into smaller links.
Okay, I got it.
And then dehydration synthesis is the opposite.
Okay.
It's like connecting those links back together.
Huh.
So water molecules are actually removed to form a bond between two molecules, creating a larger, more complex molecule.
So it's constantly breaking things down and building them up.
All the time, yes. And this is,
That's pretty impressive for something we just take for granted.
yes, it's essential.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to something a little bit greasier?
Let's talk about lipids.
Okay.
They often get a bad rap, but they're really essential for life.
So lipids, that's just a fancy word for fats, right?
Well, fats are a type of lipid,
Okay.
but it's a broader category.
Got it.
Think of lipids as a diverse group of molecules that share one key characteristic. They don't dissolve well in water.
Ah.
Remember those hydrophobic molecules?
Yeah.
Lipids are like that.
So they're like the rebels
They are the rebels.
of the molecular world.
Exactly.
But why are they so important?
Well, for one, they're energy powerhouses.
Okay.
So when your body needs a long-lasting source of energy, it turns to lipids.
Okay.
Think of them as your backup generators that kick in when the main power goes out.
Like an emergency stash.
Exactly, an emergency stash.
Okay, so they're like energy storage units. Anything else?
They're also master builders.
Oh.
They're key components of cell membranes, those protective barriers that surround every cell in your body. And they also play a vital role in insulation. Okay.
Cushioning your organs and keeping you warm. So think about like a blubbery seal swimming in icy water.
Yeah.
Lipids are their secret weapon against the cold.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So lipids, energy reserves, cell protectors, and personal heaters.
Yes.
That's pretty versatile.
Very versatile.
But hold on, there are different types of lipids, right?
There are, yeah. We have fatty acids, which are the building blocks.
Okay.
And then we have triglycerides, which are those energy storage champs.
Yeah.
And then phospholipids, which are the architects of cell membranes.
Okay.
And then steroids like cholesterol, which have important roles in cell signaling and hormone production.
Okay, so don't get bogged down in all the different names.
No, just remember each type has a special job to do.
Got it.
Yeah.
Lipids are more than just fat. They're essential for energy structure and communication.
Yes.
Okay, on to the next, molecular marvel proteins.
Proteins. The real workhorses of the cell.
Yeah.
If you could zoom in on a cell, you'd see proteins everywhere.
Busily carrying out all sorts of tasks?
So they're like the busy
The
bees.
busy bees, yes, exactly.
Always working.
Always working. And it's amazing because they're made from just 20 amino acids.
That's it.
That's it, but they can do so many incredible things.
How is that even possible?
It's all about their amazing shape-shifting abilities.
Okay.
Imagine a long chain of amino acids.
Okay.
That's the basic structure of a protein.
Uh-huh.
But this chain doesn't just stay straight. It twists and folds and coils into intricate 3D shapes.
This is like origami?
Exactly like origami, same starting material, different folding techniques, totally different outcomes.
Wow, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, and so it's those unique shapes that determine what the protein does.
Okay, so different shapes, different functions.
Different shapes, different functions, and that's how they can do everything from building and repairing tissues to transporting molecules, catalyzing chemical reactions, defending your body against invaders. They're like the multi-tools of the cellular world.
So we've got these chains of amino acids folding into specific shapes, but how do they know how to fold correctly?
That's where it gets really interesting. The sequence of amino acids in a protein, its primary structure acts like a blueprint.
Oh, okay.
It dictates how the protein will fold, and this folding process is influenced by various forces like hydrogen bonds and those hydrophobic interactions we talked about, ensuring that each protein assumes its proper shoot.
It's like the amino acids are doing a little choreographed dance.
Exactly, a choreographed dance guided by their chemical attractions and repulsions.
Okay.
And just like a misstep in a dance can throw everything off, if a protein doesn't fold correctly, it can't do its job properly.
Oh, so what happens then?
Well, a misfolded protein can lose its function, or even worse, it can clump together with other misfolded proteins and cause all sorts of problems.
Oh, no.
Yeah, think about Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease.
Yeah.
Those are linked to the accumulation of misfolded proteins in the brain.
So it's really important that they fold the right way.
It's crucial, yes.
Okay, so proteins are like these tiny machines, each with its own special function, but how do they get their energy to do all this work?
Well, that's where we come back to our good friend ATP.
ATP.
The energy currency of the cell.
Yes.
And to understand ATP, we need to talk about nucleotides.
Nucleotides now, aren't those the building blocks of DNA?
They are.
Like the
Yeah.
stuff that makes us, well, us?
Yes, you're on the right track. Nucleotides are the building blocks of DNA and RNA.
Okay.
Those essential molecules that carry our genetic information, but they're also involved in energy transfer, and that's where ATP comes in.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So what do these nucleotides look like?
Well, imagine a tiny building block
Okay.
with 3 parts,
Okay.
a sugar molecule, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base.
Okay.
So in DNA, the sugar is deoxyribose, and in RNA, it's ribose.
Uh-uh.
And the nitrogenous bases are like different colored bricks.
Okay.
And their specific arrangement along the DNA or RNA strand forms the genetic code. Yeah, so you can think of DNA and RNA like long chains of these nucleotide building blocks, each with its own unique sequence of bases.
Okay, I got it. So what about ATP? How does it fit into this?
Well, ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate.
Okay.
And it's a special type of nucleotide that acts as the primary energy carrier in cells.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a tiny rechargeable battery
Okay.
that stores and releases energy as needed.
So when we eat food, our cells break it down and use that energy to charge up those ATP molecules.
Exactly.
And then those ATP molecules can go on to power all the different processes.
Yes, power all the cellular processes like protein folding and muscle contraction.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a remarkable system of energy transfer.
So nucleotides are multi-talented.
Very much so.
They hold the code of life, and they provide the energy to make it all happen.
That's right.
Wow, okay, and they're just one of the many fascinating molecules that make up this intricate world of biology.
Exactly.
All right, are we ready to delve into the final piece of the puzzle?
I think so. Let's talk about carbohydrates.
Okay.
They're often misunderstood,
Yeah.
but they're essential for life.
Yeah.
They provide energy, they store energy, and they even contribute to structural support.
Wow, so many different roles.
Many different roles.
Okay, I remember learning about glucose.
Yes,
The simple sugar that fuels our cells, is that a carbohydrate?
absolutely. Glucose is the most common and important carbohydrate for our bodies. It's a 6-carbon sugar that can be used for immediate energy or stored as glycogen for later use, or even converted to fat for long-term energy storage.
But glycogen, what's that?
So glycogen is how animals store glucose.
Okay.
It's a branched polymer of glucose molecules found mainly in our liver and muscles.
Okay.
You can think of it as our backup energy reserve.
Like our emergency stash.
Exactly. So when our blood sugar levels drop, our bodies break down glycogen to release glucose into the bloodstream, and that keeps our energy levels stable.
So it's like our personal energy bank,
Yes,
making sure we have cash on hand.
that's a great way to put it.
But what about plants? How do they store glucose?
Plants store glucose as starch,
Starch.
which is another type of complex carbohydrate. So think about potatoes, rice grains.
Yeah.
They're all packed with starch, and they provide us with a slow and steady release of energy as we digest them.
That's interesting. So both animals and plants have their own ways of storing glucose for later.
Exactly.
What about cellulose? I know that's a plant carbohydrate, but we can't digest it.
That's right. Cellulose is a polymer of glucose.
Yeah.
But we humans lack the enzymes to break down the specific bonds between the glucose molecules in cellulose.
So that's why we can't eat grass like cows.
Exactly. Cows have these helpful bacteria in their digestive systems
Okay.
that can break down cellulose. Those
Yeah.
bacteria produce the enzymes that we lack, allowing cows to extract energy from cellulose.
So it's like a team effort.
It's a team effort. It's a
Yeah.
great example of symbiosis where two organisms are working together for mutual benefit.
Okay, so this is all starting to make sense. We've got these amazing molecules, the water, lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, and nucleotides,
Yeah.
working together to keep us alive and functioning. But I'm still curious, how do our cells actually extract the energy from the food we eat?
That's where cellular respiration comes in.
Okay.
It's like the ultimate energy conversion process happening inside every cell of your body all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
That sounds complex.
It is, but it's also incredibly fascinating.
Okay, so are you ready to dive into the details of how your body turns food into fuel?
Let's do it.
Okay, I'm ready to explore this world of cellular respiration. It's like stepping into a microscopic power plant.
Exactly. And like any power plant, cellular respiration needs fuel, and that fuel comes from the food we eat, the carbohydrates, the fats, even proteins in a pinch.
So how does that piece of pizza or that handful of berries get transformed into energy that our cells can actually use?
It all starts with breaking down those big food molecules into smaller, more manageable units. Imagine taking apart a Lego castle brick by brick. That's what digestion is doing to your food. So carbohydrates get broken down into simple sugars like glucose fats, into fatty acids, and glycerol, and proteins into amino acids.
Okay, so we've got the tiny building blocks now. What happens next?
Well, those building blocks get further processed through a series of chemical reactions, and that's where cellular respiration kicks in. There are two main pathways: anaerobic respiration, which doesn't require oxygen, and aerobic respiration, which does.
Okay, let's start with anaerobic respiration then, since that sounds simpler. Where does that take place?
Right, in the cytoplasm, the bustling center of the cell, the star of this show, is a process called glycolysis. Think of it like a 10-step dance routine where glucose, that simple sugar, gets transformed into two molecules of pyruvate.
Pyruvate. That's another one of those molecule names that always makes me think of a chemistry textbook.
Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. Just remember that pyruvate is a key intermediate molecule in cellular respiration.
Okay, so glycolysis takes glucose, turns it into pyruvate. What's the point of that?
Well, for starters, glycolysis generates a small amount of ATP, that energy currency we talked about earlier. It's not a huge payout, but it's enough to keep some basic cellular processes running even when oxygen is scarce.
Oh, so it's like our cells have a backup power source just in case the main supply gets interrupted. But what happens to that pyruvate? Does it just hang out in the cytoplasm?
It depends if oxygen is available. Pyruvate takes a trip to the mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell. But if oxygen is in short supply, like when you're sprinting and your muscles are working overtime, pyruvate goes through a process called fermentation.
Fermentation, now that's a word I recognize. Isn't that what makes bread rise and beer, well, beery?
You got it. Fermentation is an anaerobic pathway that helps regenerate a molecule called NAD+, which is essential for glycolysis to keep chugging along. There are two main types of fermentation: lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation.
Lactic acid, isn't that what causes that burning sensation in your muscles after a tough workout?
Exactly when your muscles are working hard and oxygen is limited, they switch to lactic acid fermentation. Pyruvate gets converted to lactic acid, which can then be recycled back to glucose by the liver.
So it's like our muscles have a built-in recycling system for energy production. That's pretty cool. What about alcoholic fermentation?
That's the pathway that yeast use to produce ethanol and carbon dioxide. Think of those bubbles in your champagne or the fluffy texture of your sourdough bread. That's alcoholic fermentation at work.
Okay, so fermentation is like a detour route for pyruvate when oxygen is scarce. But what happens when oxygen is plentiful? The pyruvate gets to go to the mitochondria, right?
Exactly. The mitochondria are like the VIP lounge of the cell where the real energy party
Okay,
happens.
so pyruvate enters the mitochondria, and then what?
It gets a makeover. Pyruvate is converted to a molecule called acetyl-CoA, which is like a golden ticket to the main event, the Krebs cycle.
The Krebs cycle, that name always sounded so intimidating.
It's not as scary as it sounds. I promise. Think of it as a circular assembly line where acetyl-CoA gets broken down step by step, releasing energy along the way.
Okay, so the Krebs cycle is extracting energy from acetyl-CoA. What happens to that energy?
It gets stored in special molecules called electron carriers, like NADH and FADH2. These molecules are like tiny shuttle buses picking up high-energy electrons and transporting them to the final stage of aerobic respiration, the electron transport chain.
The electron transport chain, that sounds epic.
Yeah.
Where does this grand finale take place?
Right here in the inner membrane of the mitochondria, it's like a series of interconnected escalators gradually lowering the energy of those electrons as they move from one complex to the next.
And what happens to the energy released by those electrons?
It's used to pump protons, tiny positively charged particles across the inner membrane, creating a concentration gradient. Imagine one side of the membrane getting packed with protons while the other side has fewer etons. That difference in concentration creates a force like water building up behind a dam.
Okay, so we've got this proton power building up. How does that translate into ATP, that energy currency our cells need?
That's where the star of the show comes in, ATP synthase. This remarkable enzyme acts like a turbine, using the flow of protons back across the membrane to generate ATP.
So it's like those protons are rushing through ATP synthase, spinning the turbine and generating energy.
Exactly. It's a brilliant example of how nature harnesses energy gradients to power essential processes. And this whole process where the energy from electron transport is used to create a proton gradient that drives ATP synthesis is called oxidative phosphorylation.
Oxidative phosphorylation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to write that one down, but it makes sense. It involves oxygen as the final electron acceptor, right?
Absolutely. At the end of the electron transport chain, oxygen molecules pick up those spent electrons and combine with protons to form water. That's why we need to breathe oxygen. It's essential for aerobic respiration to keep running.
Wow, so without oxygen, the whole electron transport chain would shut down, and our cells wouldn't be able to produce enough ATP to function.
Exactly. Aerobic respiration is far more efficient than anaerobic respiration. It's like upgrading from a basic bicycle to a high-powered sports car in terms of energy production.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. We've got glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain. It's a complex dance of molecules all working together to extract energy from food and convert it into ATP.
And it's happening inside every cell of your body right now. But there's even more to the story. We need to talk about how other fuel sources, like fats and proteins, can also be used to generate ATP.
Right, because we don't just eat glucose.
Exactly. Our bodies are incredibly adaptable and can use a variety of fuel sources to meet our energy needs. So are you ready to explore how fats and proteins join the cellular respiration party?
Okay, let's talk about fats and proteins then, and how they get in on the cellular respiration action.
Yeah, they're like the understudies waiting in the wings, you know,
Ready to go.
ready to step in when glucose isn't available.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, our bodies are so resourceful when it comes to energy production. So let's start with fats. They're like those long-lasting energy bars, you know,
Packed with calories.
packed with calories, exactly.
But how do our cells break down those fats and turn them into ATP?
Well, it's a multi-step process,
Oh.
but the key is a pathway called beta oxidation.
Beta oxidation.
Yeah, imagine taking a long chain of fatty acids
Okay.
and chopping it up into these smaller 2-carbon units.
Okay.
And those 2-carbon units are then converted into acetyl-CoA.
Acetyl-CoA, that's the golden ticket
That's the golden ticket to the Krebs cycle.
to the Krebs cycle.
Exactly.
So fatty acids are basically getting prepped to enter the same energy-producing pathway as glucose.
Exactly. And here's a bonus. Those 2-carbon units also generate NADH and FADH2
Oh.
during beta oxidation.
Okay.
So that provides even more fuel for the electron transport chain.
So it's like fats are giving us a double dose of energy.
They are.
Wow. No wonder they're such a concentrated source of calories.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about proteins.
Okay.
They're not the body's preferred fuel source, but when carbohydrates and fats are in short, supply proteins can step in to provide energy.
So it's like our body has that backup generator.
That backup generator, yes.
All right.
That runs on protein just in case the main power goes out.
I like that analogy.
So proteins get broken down into amino acids,
Uh-huh.
and those amino acids can be converted into intermediates of glycolysis or the Krebs cycle, depending on their structure.
So proteins are like these versatile actors,
They are
able to play different roles.
different roles in the cellular respiration drama.
I like that this is all so fascinating. We've
Yeah.
covered so much from those basic building blocks of life to the intricate pathways of cellular respiration.
Mhm.
I feel like I've just had a crash course in bioenergetics.
And you did a fantastic job.
Woof, I have to give you all the credit. You're an amazing teacher.
Oh, well, thank you.
You've made it so engaging and easy to understand.
Well, that's the goal.
Yeah, to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into biology. We explored the molecules that make life possible, from water and lipids to proteins, carbohydrates, and nucleotides, and we uncovered the secrets of cellular respiration, the process that turns the food we eat into energy to power every thought and action and breath.
It really is remarkable how these intricate processes happening at the microscopic level orchestrate the symphony of life.
Yeah, and remember, this is just the beginning of your journey into biology.
Yeah.
There's so much more to explore,
So much more.
from DNA replication to the immune system.
Absolutely.
So keep asking questions,
Yes.
keep learning, and keep marveling at the wonders of the natural world.
Definitely.
Until next time, happy exploring.